As a reward for his taking of Zacatecas, President Santa Anna had been promoted to the rank of General-in-Chief and given the exalted title Benemerito en grado heroico, and there was a rumor that if he succeeded in subduing the Tejanos, he was to be named Benemerito Universal y Perpetuo. Accordingly, he spent the late fall of 1835 preparing his army for a major assault against those infuriating dissidents who had begun calling themselves Texicans. Although none of the Anglos had been born in Tejas, and many had been there for less than a year, he agreed, with an aide who assured him, "They're little better than that rabble you helped defeat at Medina in 1813. Cutthroats sprung from American jails, adventurers who drifted down the Mississippi River, corrupt traders from Louisiana, and, I will admit, a few honest farmers from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Alabama." What particularly infuriated Santa Anna was the surprising number of settlers with Spanish names who sided with the Anglos, sensible and well-educated men like Lorenzo de Zavala, who had been his close friend during the liberal days, then a prisoner for 3 years in San Juan de Ulua in Veracruz Bay, delegate to the Cortes in Spain, a member of the Senate, minister to France, and governor of the state of Mexico. One of the wisest and grandest of contemporary Mexicans, he had found Santa Anna's violation of the Constitution of 1824 unacceptable and had fled north to Tejas to join the rebels. What was such a man, Santa Anna wanted to know, yelping about? There were others like him, and the dictator was determined to capture and shoot them all. He had developed the simplistic idea that anyone who failed to follow his mercurial shifts deserved to be eliminated. "I will set directions, and men like Zavala are obligated to leap into line." Often during that critical year of preparation, Santa Anna reminded his subordinates, Zacatecas was only a beginning, and he indicated on the map the towns he would annihilate in the coming battle. San Antonio de Bejar, Nacogdoches, San Felipe de Austin, Victoria, all must feel our fury. Because the Mexican army would play a key role in the forthcoming invasion, its unique composition must be understood. It was a large conscript army of untrained, illiterate, and ununiformed peasants clustered about a well-drilled professional officer corps. The middle-rank officers were first class. The foot soldiers were cannon fodder. The cavalry was the best in the New World. The artillery was pathetic. The field generals were an uncertain lot. Some were almost as skilled as Santa Anna, but the bulk were incompetent opportunists who used the army as their gold mine. Services like the medical corps, the engineer, and logistics were abominable, if they existed at all. But one fact became apparent in all the engagements this army undertook. Some of the officers and men were among the bravest to be found anywhere, accounting for the many victories the Mexican forces won. The Mexican army operated under difficulties. Since the central government was continually bankrupt, the generals had to borrow money from lenders who charged 48% per annum. Deliveries of guns that would not fire and food that could not be eaten were common. One large sum turned over to Santa Anna's son-in-law for the purchase of supplies largely vanished. He stole it. One general sold supplies to his own troops at outrageous prices. Another lent money he had sequestered during previous campaigns at 4% per month. There were no doctors and no priests to give last rites to men who sometimes died at shocking rates, even from ordinary illnesses that could have been cured. When Santa Anna left the capital to take command of the Army of Operations, as it was technically called, he supposed that he would find 30,000 trained professional troops awaiting him. He found 2,000, the others having deserted. To repair the deficiency, he ordered mass levies, sweeps through the countryside that resulted in impressment, the opening of jails, and the gathering up of illiterates and incompetents. From the Yucatan and the peninsula below Oaxaca, huge formations of white-trousered, sandaled Indians who had never known cold or seen snow were marched north without even knowing the language under which they were to serve. It was a sprawling mass that greeted Santa Anna, and its miraculous conversion into a fighting force was possible only through his military expertise. An aide said, "He commands everything. He is a cavalryman, foot soldier, commissary, priest, mapmaker, artilleryman, and drill master. If we had 3 others like him, we would conquer the world." Santa Anna himself had threatened, "If those Americans give me trouble, I may march right on and capture Washington." The officers of Santa Anna's army, when properly accoutered, were a handsome lot, especially the cavalry, which wore blue trousers adorned by a scarlet side seam, a scarlet pigeon-tailed jacket with green lapels, and epaulettes, and a green collar. The cap was of tanned cowhide, with a high wooden plume which remained erect even during a charge. Distinction was provided by the crossed white straps of the bandolier. The horses, too, were caparisoned in blazing colors. But the predominant look of the Mexican army was determined by the infantry, which was supposed to wear white trousers, blue jackets with scarlet cuffs and front edging, and green epaulettes. This uniform was topped by a tall, black leather hat bearing a red plume and a big brass shield. Broad white bandoliers crossed the chest, and emphasis was added by the red blanket roll that was carried on the shoulders behind the neck. Properly uniformed infantrymen, well decked out, could evoke memories of Napoleon's armies, obsolete in their flamboyancy but imposing nevertheless. Unfortunately, because funds for equipment were often stolen by the generals, not 1 foot soldier in 10 had a uniform. Most had to march in the loose white trousers of the countryside, topped by a flimsy white shirt and no hat at all. If they had shoes, and many did not, they were apt to be sandals. The appearance of Santa Anna's army was not what a Prussian drill master would have approved. It looked to be a rabble. This impression was reinforced by a tradition whereby a soldier's entire family accompanied him on maneuvers in the field, and not infrequently into battle itself. The women, wives, laundresses, cooks, and prostitutes marched with their men, as did many children, just in whatever rags they happened to find at the moment, creating a messy following often many miles long. Old women, young adventuresses, bawling children, mules, and donkeys if the family had any, stoves for the night campfire, and village merchants hoping to make a sale, all followed the army. A fashion plate general like Santa Anna rarely galloped back to see how his rear was doing. Even a hasty sight of it was repugnant, but the entourage was necessary because the army failed to provide regular food for the men. Had the women not foraged the countryside, their men would have starved. It was such an army that marched out of the assembly area of Saltillo on 25th of January, 1836. General Santa Anna and his resplendent staff galloped ahead to Monclova, and by the 13th of February, Santa Anna was already snug inside the little town far ahead of his troops, who were still trying to traverse the exposed and dangerous wasteland north of Saltillo. He worried little about his men because the day started with a comfortable temperature near 60 and became so warm that many soldiers removed their jackets and marched in shirts only, or sometimes not even that. But this was the region that played host to the dreaded blue norther, in which, under a leaden sky and the persistent winds of an incoming storm, the temperature could drop 30 or 40 degrees in less than half an hour. Such a storm now hit the unprepared men who had never experienced the phenomenon, and at its first warning blast, they quickly donned their shirts and jackets. Rapidly, the temperature dropped to 50, then 40, then to an appalling 30. Men began to slow their pace, hugging themselves to keep warm, and mules started to wander in confusion. By mid-afternoon, a wild, blinding snowstorm was sweeping across the unfettered prairies of Coahuila y Tejas, and at dusk, men and animals began to freeze. All night, the dreadful storm continued, throwing 12 to 14 inches of snow upon men who had never before felt its icy fingers. They began to collapse from frozen fatigue. When the snow covered them, they appeared as inert, white mounds along the route of the march, as if in their final moments they had pulled a fleecy blanket over their dying bodies. Worst hit were the pitiful Indians from the Yucatan. They simply fell down and died, hundreds of them with no shoes, no blankets, no warm clothing of any kind. Sometimes 8 or 9 would huddle together in a hopeless mass, clutching one another for even a fragmentary warmth. When they perished, the snow formed a rounded hump over them, a kind of natural mausoleum.